on a cold winter night in London. The sound of sirens broke the silence in one of the city's most expensive neighborhoods. Police rushed to a luxury penthouse, responding to a distress call from an unknown number. As they entered, they found Richard Evans, a powerful and wealthy businessman, lying dead in his living room. A bullet wound in his chest, his expensive silk shirt soaked in blood. Sitting just a few feet away was Emily Walker, his young lover, her hands trembling and stained with red. She stared at Richard's lifeless body in shock, unable to speak. Her expensive dress was torn, her makeup smudged, as if she had been crying for hours. The crime scene was full of clues, yet none of them made sense. A broken wine glass lay on the marble floor, its pieces scattered near the fireplace. The penthouse phone was missing, though Richard's assistant later confirmed it was always kept on the side table. A love note, torn in half, was found on the floor near Richard's body. The words were barely visible, but the ending read, "I can't do this anymore." As detectives examined the room, one question became clear. Was this a crime of passion, or was there something much darker at play? Was Emily the killer, or was she just another victim in a dangerous game she didn't understand? Richard Evans was the kind of man everyone admired. At 50, he had built an empire in the finance world, becoming one of London's most respected businessmen. He was known for his sharp mind, charm, and generosity. His public image was flawless, a loving husband, a dedicated philanthropist, and a man of power. He lived in a stunning mansion in Kensington with his wife, Claire Evans, a former model turned socialite, who was adored by London's elite. Together, they were the picture of a perfect marriage. But behind the expensive suits and the carefully curated life, Richard was living a dangerous double life. For the past 2 years, he had been involved with Emily Walker, a 25-year-old aspiring model. Their affair had started with expensive gifts, luxurious vacations, and whispered promises of a future together. Emily believed she was different, that she was the only woman he had ever truly loved outside of his marriage. That illusion shattered when Emily discovered she wasn't his first mistress, and she certainly wasn't his only one. A hidden drawer in his penthouse revealed letters from other women, receipts for gifts she had never received, and photos of him with a mystery brunette in Paris. The realization hit her like a storm. She was just another secret in Richard's web of lies. As Emily pieced together the truth, she felt anger, betrayal, and heartbreak creeping in. Had he ever really loved her? Or was she just another temporary escape for a man who could never be satisfied? Claire Evans was no fool. For 20 years, she had played the role of the perfect wife, graceful, elegant, always standing by Richard's side at charity events and business galas. She knew how powerful men operated. They worked long hours, traveled frequently, and often had distractions along the way. But Claire had always believed that, no matter what, she was Richard's real home. That belief started to crack when his business trips became more frequent and longer. He had always been careful, but Claire wasn't blind. The smell of unfamiliar perfume on his shirts, the rushed phone calls he took in private, the way he started locking his phone, all the signs were there. She decided to stop wondering and hired a private detective. What she discovered didn't surprise her. Richard had a mistress, a young, beautiful model named Emily Walker. Claire had seen it all before, but something about this affair felt different. When she confronted Richard one evening over dinner, expecting an argument, he only laughed. He leaned back in his chair, sipping his whiskey, and said in a low voice, "Claire, you're not leaving me. You never will." His confidence was chilling. He had built a world around them that Claire could never escape from. Their money, their status, their reputation, it was all too intertwined. Divorce wasn't an option. Not for him. Not for her. But the night before his murder, Richard told Claire something that shook her to her core. Something that made her question everything she thought she knew about him. Something that made her realize his affair was the least of her worries. What was the secret Richard had kept hidden? And did Claire finally decide it was time to take control? For 2 years, Emily Walker believed Richard Evans was her future. He had promised her everything: a new life, a home of their own, freedom from secrecy. She imagined the day he would leave his wife, and they would finally be together, just the two of them. Richard's words had always been so convincing. "Just a little more time, love," he would whisper in her ear. "These things are complicated. I need to do it the right way." He showered her with designer gifts, took her on romantic trips, and made her feel like the only woman in the world. But one night, everything changed. While waiting for Richard in his penthouse, Emily stumbled upon a drawer left slightly open. Inside was an airline ticket, a one-way flight to Monaco. Her heart raced with excitement until she noticed something chilling. There was only one seat booked. Richard wasn't taking her with him. Reality hit her like a punch to the stomach. Had he been lying to her this whole time? Was she just a temporary plaything for him, just like all the others? Had she wasted 2 years of her life on a fantasy that was never real? As she sat alone in that cold, luxurious penthouse, something inside her snapped. The heartbreak, the betrayal, it all turned into rage. She wasn't going to let him walk away so easily. It was supposed to be a special night. Richard had invited Emily to his penthouse, just like he always did when he wanted to make things right. A fancy bottle of red wine sat on the table, 2 glasses half-filled. Soft jazz played in the background, the city lights glowing through the floor-to-ceiling windows. At first, things were normal. Emily smiled, pretending nothing was wrong. But inside, she was boiling. The airline ticket, the lies, the feeling of being used, it all haunted her. She needed answers. As the night went on, she finally asked him, "When are we leaving, Richard? When are we starting our life together?" Richard hesitated. His smile faded, and his usual charm disappeared. "Emily," he sighed, rubbing his temples, "it's complicated." That was all it took. Her frustration erupted. She grabbed the wine glass, slamming it down on the table. "You never planned to leave her, did you?" she screamed. Neighbors later reported hearing shouting, glass breaking, and heavy footsteps. Then silence. At exactly 11:45 p.m., a gunshot echoed through the building. By the time the police arrived, Richard Evans was dead. Lying on the floor of his luxury penthouse, a bullet wound in his chest. And Emily Walker? She was sitting beside him, her hands covered in blood, staring at nothing. When the police arrived at Richard Evans' penthouse, they expected a straightforward case. A wealthy businessman, a young mistress, and a crime of passion. It all seemed clear. But as they examined the scene, things didn't add up. Richard lay on the floor, shot once in the chest, but there was no sign of the gun. The murder weapon, a crucial piece of evidence, had vanished. Emily Walker sat nearby, her hands covered in blood, her eyes wide and unfocused. She looked at the officers, but said the same thing over and over. "I don't remember. I don't remember what happened." The penthouse security cameras, which should have captured everything, had been switched off hours before the shooting. The building's security confirmed that Richard had disabled them himself. Detectives were left with a troubling question. If Emily didn't pull the trigger, then who did? And more importantly, where was the missing gun? As detectives dug deeper into Richard Evans' life, they realized his murder might not have been about love at all. This wasn't just a wealthy man caught in an affair. It was something much bigger. Investigators uncovered a series of hidden bank accounts spread across Switzerland, the Cayman Islands, and Dubai. Millions of pounds had been moved in and out of these accounts. But for what? Some of the transactions linked back to offshore companies that didn't exist on paper. Richard wasn't just keeping secrets from his wife. He had multiple mistresses, each living in luxury apartments paid for under fake business names. Emily wasn't even the only woman in London. Then came the biggest revelation. Richard was in serious debt. He owed money to dangerous people, the kind who don't just send warning letters. A cryptic text message on his phone from an unknown number sent chills down the investigator's spines. You have until midnight. Pay up or pay the price. Suddenly, Emily's guilt seemed less certain. Had she been framed? Or had someone else been waiting for the perfect moment to get revenge? The murder of Richard Evans had already shaken London's elite, but the trial turned into an even bigger spectacle. Emily Walker, the young mistress found at the crime scene, was arrested and charged with murder. The media painted her as the jealous lover who killed in a fit of rage. In court, Emily sat pale and silent as the prosecution presented its case. She wanted him to leave his wife. When she realized he never would, she snapped, the lawyer argued. The evidence was damning. Her fingerprints on the wine glass, her blood-stained hands, and the argument that neighbors overheard just before the gunshot. But Emily had her own story. I loved Richard, she told the jury. I never wanted to hurt him. I don't even remember what happened that night. She claimed she blacked out after their fight and had no memory of the gunshot. Just when it seemed like the trial was about to end with Emily's conviction, a shocking new witness stepped forward. A security guard from Richard's office came forward with a hidden piece of evidence, a voicemail left on Richard's phone just hours before his death. The voice on the recording sent shockwaves through the courtroom. It wasn't Emily. It was someone else. And their words changed everything. Richard, you lied to me for the last time. Tonight, you'll pay for it. After weeks of heated arguments in court, the jury finally reached a decision. The world waited as Emily Walker stood in the courtroom, trembling, her future in the hands of 12 strangers. When the judge read the verdict, gasps filled the room. Emily was found guilty, but not of murder. Instead, she was convicted of manslaughter, a lesser charge. The jury believed she had been involved in Richard's death, but wasn't the one who planned it. Emily's reaction was a mix of relief and fear. If she didn't murder Richard, then who did? But just as the case seemed closed, detectives uncovered something shocking. While clearing out Richard's office, police found a hidden safe that had never been searched before. Inside, they discovered a second phone with deleted messages, documents linking Richard to secret business deals, a letter addressed to C with the words, "If something happens to me, you know why." The initial C sent shivers down everyone's spine. Claire Evans, Richard's wife. Had she known something all along? Had she been the one pulling the strings? As Emily was taken away in handcuffs, a terrifying question lingered in the air. Did the real killer just get away? Years passed after Emily Walker's conviction. The world moved on, but the case of Richard Evans' murder never truly faded from public memory. Some believed Emily had gotten what she deserved, while others questioned whether justice had really been served. The missing gun, the hidden bank accounts, and the cryptic clues still didn't add up. Then, one day, an investigative journalist named Daniel Harris made a shocking discovery. While working on a documentary about the case, he obtained an old, unexamined backup of Richard Evans' phone records. Buried deep in the files was a voicemail that had never been played in court. Daniel pressed play. Richard's voice, calm but urgent, came through. "If anything happens to me, you know who to blame." Everyone expected him to say Emily's name, but he didn't. The name he spoke was someone else entirely. The revelation sent shockwaves through the justice system. The case was officially reopened, and detectives began retracing their steps. What they found was chilling. Evidence had been ignored, key witnesses never questioned, and someone had manipulated the entire investigation. And then, finally, the truth came out. The real murderer had been hiding in plain sight the entire time. Someone who had the most to lose. Someone who had orchestrated everything and walked away free. As police arrived at a quiet countryside estate, ready to make an arrest, one final question remained. Would they be too late?